It is no secret that the French way of life is different than that of America. Both cultures are very proud people, but in different ways. Upon first arriving to Paris, I was informed of their seemingly universal healthcare system and their unemployment policies, in which allow for their employees that have been laid off to collect 70% of their income for up to 2 years, both of which seemed very shocking to me. Secondly, I found that European students tend to be much more open in talking about politics in casual conversation. Overall, the students are very well educated in topics that interest them, especially when it has to do with American politics. I am almost ashamed to say the number of times the French, German, Australian, and other international students seem to be more well informed about the specifics of American laws and politics than I was. One thing I did find, however, was how critical others are of our government. They often point out all of our flaws and present what they see to be the perfect solutions to all of our issues and dilemmas. In many ways, their presentations are valid in theory, but what they do not understand is how impractical they truly are. Even though we are approximately the same size geographically as Europe, the United States is often seen as a group of one people because we are the same country that shares the same central currency, government, and language. They fail to see how difficult it is to manage over 300 million people. Different people have different viewpoints within our country depending on where they come from, geographically, religiously, and financially. One thing that I have found quite interesting about French and political issues is the amount of protests that they do. Since I have been to France, I have seen a number of protests with hundreds of thousands of participants. The major topic of these issues was the legalization of gay marriage, and I had seen protests both for and against. But as we know, on April 23rd, 2013, the National Assembly voted in favor of the right to gay marriage in France. There had been protests against former President Nicolas Sarkozy, and there will most likely be protests against the current president, Francois Hollande. I was intrigued by these protests, so I had interviewed a friend about the topic.
It's a way for us, like the population, to express our feelings and especially our dissatisfaction considering the decision on new laws or what's happening in the French society. There's a way to be heard to from the from us to the government to express ourselves. So there have been many issues in the past for which people have protested. First one was the French Revolutions in 1789, where people like were working really hard, but there was many taxes, and on the other side, the government and the king, like they had all the money they wanted. Like you can see the Palace of Versailles, like it shows the differences between people working, laboring, all this stuff, and on the other side, the huge richness of the court, like when we say there was a king, a queen, and so people wanted to react to say no, we don't want anymore this system. Recently against gay marriage, so it's more specific as it's more the Catholic population that protest against this new decision, but I think it won't be effective. Like it's a question, but it's a minority, and the government is just gonna let them protest and let it go. The person who generally leads or organizes these protests, it's a leader in the population of a group. Like May 1968 was student from Nanterre University near La Défense, and then they were encouraged by unions or political parties. Um, so it's often the population, but sometimes for work condition, like there is union specific to organize to organize meetings. like who say we're gonna meet there at this place. But now with Facebook, I can see on my Facebook invitation to go on strike against the gay marriage. So are the protests effective? So I think they can be effective, and some of them have been effective, like the French Revolution. So in 1789, we went from how you say, when there is a king, to the democracy. That's what led us to democracy and human rights. And uh, then there was I was like 15 years old. Protests against a first job contract, and it's students who created this movement because it was not in their favor, and it lasted for 2 or 3 months. They were not they didn't give up until the project was aborted by the government, and so sometimes it works, yeah. But the way the government react to these protests can be just to ignore them, or just to say no, it's just a small part of the population, or they can take into account this advice and begin negotiations. So when it's for work condition, I don't know if you see any, but sometimes in La Défense, they take all the space available. And once, it was 2 years ago, we couldn't go to Yeseg because of unions movements. And it's the leader of CGT, it's the name of a movement, who is organizing that. And he is the one who then negotiates with the government. There is agreements and all that. So, personally, I have never participated in a protest yet, but I think maybe I will go one day.
As you can see, each nation has a different way of dealing with political issues, depending on the culture's acceptance of opposing viewpoints. I agree with Anais when she says that sometimes protests can be effective, and sometimes they cannot be. But regardless, anytime you see tens of thousands of people walking to support one cause, it tends to leave a message.